Hello, friends. Today we're going to be talking about Jupiter finally stationing to go direct in the sign of Cancer at 15 degrees. And this has been a long journey since Jupiter ingressed into the sign of Cancer in June 2026. And then it's stationed to go retrograde on November 10th. And a lot of us have noted that this Jupiter has been super subtle. We're like, what the hell is this Jupiter doing? But this Jupiter has been doing big work. It's been reorganizing our inner foundation, the inner foundation of our lives. If you pay attention internally, you have changed a lot. In the past few months, you have revisited old patterns. Somehow you became engaged with them so that you would have to see it. Old relationship patterns have been coming up. Old spaces, questions of belonging, care, security, questions of safety, and for some of us, it's been very literal, matters pertaining to our family dynamics. And for a lot of us, it might have felt like I'm moving backwards. I'm not moving forward in life. Why am I revisiting all these past things and stuff? What exactly is this Jupiter doing? What I want you to know, this was not a regression. This was a process of renewal. We had to go through these phases. So to understand what Jupiter's been doing so that we understand where we're going with this Jupiter, I'm going to go back to the beginning a little bit to bring us to where we are and where we're heading to. And before getting into the depth of this transit, I want to let you know there are plenty of videos coming up. Next one, I'm very excited about this one, Mars conjunct Rahu. Oh my God, in the sign of Pisces. And I also want to let you know I have another video about Jupiter in the sign of Cancer when it ingressed last year. I'll link that in the description box below if you want greater depth about what this Jupiter is about. The first thing I want us to remember, Jupiter is the principle of growth and expansion. It symbolizes the plus sign, so it's about addition, augmenting something, growing something, but it's a very specific kind of expansion. Like some people are like, well, Jupiter can grow tumors. Well, if Jupiter's with Rahu, let's say, and there's no control about it, sure, but not Jupiter by itself. Jupiter expands systems. It brings the internal component of a system into relation with each other. So think about this. Mercury will bring sequences into relations. Jupiter is bringing subsets and sets into relationship with each other. In other words, Jupiter is expanding the inner coherence of a system. And that means the parts actually have to work and be functional. It's talking about order and integration. And I want you to keep in mind, Jupiter's natural expansion is not from the external facet of something. It's growing the interiority of something, and that expansion is making it look like it's growing from the outside. And I want you to think about this. When a system becomes more comprehensive, more coherent, it can hold more complexity. This is some of the reasons why Jupiter is related to law, to philosophy, to systems of knowledge. And in our personal realm, that means we can hold more experiences, which means it enriches our experience with life. And what we come to experience then comes to be a part of our growth process. So growth in a Jupiterian sense is not just about senselessly getting bigger. Growth happens when the system becomes organized, integrated, coherent, so it can sustain a richer level of life. This is another reason why Jupiter is connected to evolution. Now, let's take the sign of Cancer. This is very important to understand the basics of Jupiter and Cancer, which actually allows us to see why Jupiter is being exalted in Cancer, one of the reasons from a symbolic level. And in some ways, Cancer is very different than Jupiter, but in a lot of ways, they have a lot of resonance. For instance, Cancer represents the interiority. It's the inner life and the inner landscape of a being. It's the space where our experiences are absorbed. It's a feminine sign, so it's got that receptive nature of pulling in. Experiences are held and processed in this interiority. It's also the repository for memories, the experiences we have already had. They have made pathways, impressions. So Cancer becomes something like a container that holds all of our inner content, as well as our outer content, because we've experienced them, now Cancer's holding it. And it's also a place where our feelings, desires, needs, and our personal meaning come to accumulate. Everything's happening on the level of the internal self, right? And because of all these facets, Cancer is not concerned with external achievements. Cancer is concerned with the inner continuity of life. It protects the internal system of the self, of the being. So now let's bring Jupiter into the sign of Cancer. As I was saying, Jupiter's expansion actually occurs within the system. So it's also talking about an interiority. Now it's coming into the internal system of the self, let's say, in the sign of Cancer. So we're talking about that expansive, augmenting quality of Jupiter now expanding our inner landscape, expanding our inner system. So here, Jupiter, we could say that it's expanding our psychological realm, the emotional realm of the self. And that's because, again, Cancer is the root container. So Jupiter is growing the roots from within. Jupiter wants to reorganize the system from bottom up, from the roots up. It wants to make the inner system of the self more coherent and integrated. Jupiter is exalted here because we're talking about expansion within the context of a containment. It doesn't become cancerous because without containment, growth is denoting chaos, disorder. Jupiter is coming, reorganizing, reintegrating our internal structure. So this transit, when we say Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, is about resystemization of the self. And this kind of growth has to be slow. Jupiter doesn't destabilize our inner sense of being, those pathways, but slowly it starts to readjust, integrate. And if you pay attention, you go back to since Jupiter came into the sign of Cancer, we've been wrestling and grappling with questions of what actually nourishes me in life? What people, what things sustain me, make me feel safe and secure? And a lot of these questions could have been flipped on their head in a negative sense. Like, why am I surrounded with these people that don't nourish me, that don't sustain me? Why is it that I don't feel nourished? That really depends on your psychology, but we've been grappling with such questions. We've been pondering, what does it mean to belong with these people in this environment? Or why is it that I don't feel a sense of belonging? And if you think about it, these questions are not meant to create dramatic changes in our external conditions. They're meant to actually reshape how we feel, how we perceive, how our subjectivity is interpreting things. So it's a quiet shift. And Jupiter has been doing this beautifully if you pay attention. And when the inner direction of our lives start to change, we begin to change. And because of that, we behave differently externally. That means we act differently. And that begins to change the direction of our lives because we start to have different kinds of experiences where now that needs to be reintegrated in the self. It's like a feedback loop that's constantly feeding itself. How you feel is what you do then creates a feeling and then on and on. Like we've been pondering this a lot if you reflect back. Like, why do I let certain people in my life? Why do I choose the environments that I go into? We've been thinking about how we protect our time and energy, who we're willing to nurture and who we are not going to nurture, who's nurturing us. These are all Cancerian questions that we've been grappling with. And that's because Jupiter is there. And Jupiter's work has felt settled because we've just been grappling with our inner landscape rather than having some external, obvious outcome out in the world. But if you pay attention, these stirrings of Jupiter have not been small because we've been redefining a lot of things. We have redrawn certain boundaries. There's a certain way now that we want to feel and experience our lives, ourselves. So there's been a quiet reorganization of our inner system. But now I want to bring in another layer. I want us to go a little bit deeper by looking at the nakshatra where Jupiter has just been retrograding in. And now it has to go back through that entire nakshatra again. Like Jupiter in the sign of Cancer is talking about the field of growth. But that stellar backdrop, which are the nakshatras, is talking about the star system where Jupiter is sitting in it right now. It actually allows us to zoom even further in and see the process of this growth in a very detailed manner. It's going to reveal to us how this expansion has been happening step by step. This is the beauty of the nakshatras. And what I'm going to do, you have to do a conversion from the sidereal by 23 degrees to get the right degrees in the tropical zodiac. I'll put that on the side here. But let's get right into the nakshatra that Jupiter's been going back and forth in, which is Punarvasu. So Jupiter stations basically right at the end of this nakshatra called Punarvasu. Punarvasu ends at 27 degrees of Cancer in the tropical zodiac. So Jupiter got all the way up to 25 degrees. That's where it's stationed to go back to do its retrograde motion. And the nakshatra of Punarvasu starts about in around 14 degrees. And now Jupiter is back to 15 degrees, pretty much at the beginning of this nakshatra, and it has to make all that way back to 27 degrees to get out of this nakshatra. And let me give you a little bit of background to Punarvasu Nakshatra. If you're not familiar with it, I do have an in-depth video about that nakshatra. I'll link that in the description box below too. But the goddess, the deity related to Punarvasu, her name is Aditi, and she's considered to be the great cosmic mother. And Aditi represents the indivisible field of existence. She is the boundless expanse of space. And in this space is where all life emerges, and is the same space where all life must return back to after death. And I want you to keep in mind, I just said she's the mother goddess. She's not exactly a maternal mother goddess. She represents the infinite continuity of existence itself. She's that which encompasses everything. Everything is within it. Like in the Vedic imagination, Aditi is the limitless sky, and she's the mother of all the sky gods. She herself is that field where the gods arise from her. And she's also the creator of the four elements. And if you think about it, it's the recombination of these elements in different ways, which gives rise to all the different entities that are existing, all the forms that exist. So she is the ingredients. She's bringing the ingredients of life into existence so it can have existing entities. So as you can see, she doesn't have this maternal quality per se. There are other gods in the Vedic tradition that embody more of that maternal, nurturing, loving quality. Aditi is a kind of a progenerator as the feminine principle. The point is, nothing can exist outside of her because she is the field that contains everything. And when we talk about Jupiter coming into this nakshatra, I'm saying that Aditi is the expanse of space. And then let's think about what Jupiter's element is ether, which is again talking about a subtle medium or dimension that also permits things to come into existence. So it's also talking about space. And in both their contexts, space is not something that's empty. Space is a condition that allows other things to come into existence. Itself becomes an organizing principle for all emergent entities. That means without space, nothing could emerge, come into being, move, relate, grow, evolve. So we can see in this nakshatra with Jupiter, we're talking about the absolute principle of expansion. It's expanding some kind of a space. And what is the space? It's our inner space that Jupiter is expanding. That means our psychological and emotional capacity is going through an expansion process. It's about our capacity to hold and to process experience. And we have to remember, every human being has a different capacity for having new experiences. In fact, some people have very little space. And what I mean by this, you can see it in their everyday life. A small disagreement or disappointment will overwhelm the entire system. A conflict will immediately produce defensiveness. They can't take anything in. They have to keep it out here and fight with it here because there is no room on the inside. We all go through this when we have been overwhelmed by some sort of a life situation. Our receptivity is lost. We don't allow anything to come in. The inner space, the RAM space is full. We fight with everything out here. You'll see it with some people. They'll say, I have very low thresholds. I'm being triggered because it's bringing up some sort of a painful memory. I can't look at that thing because I'm feeling all of this inner sensitivity. This is saying something about the system not being able to incorporate and integrate, being able to define, compartmentalize some things, because sometimes we need to do that, put something on a shelf and then come back to it. But if we don't have space, we don't have any shelvings. Everything is just overwhelming everything else. So it's just creating this downward spiral because experiences can't be processed. It's disorganizing and creating internal chaos if the slightest new thing tries to enter in. So this is telling us the inner container of the self is still small. But if this inner space can expand, if it can get bigger, experiences that once upon a time felt super overwhelming can now come into relation with other experiences and don't create an internal collapse. They get digested, they get processed, they find the rightful place in the system. Like you can have conflicting viewpoints come in, and these different perspectives can actually coexist without creating internal conflict, without forcing the mind to polarize or to become super rigid, to have to resist it. Don't let it come in. It doesn't have a place inside of me. And if you think about it, this expansion of the inner self is one of the most important aspects of our lives that we can cultivate, because this is how we can grow psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And this is precisely what Jupiter has been doing, not only in the sign of Cancer, but also in the nakshatra of Punarvasu. And Punarvasu has been helping Jupiter to do this. And I say Punarvasu has been helping Jupiter because this nakshatra has a particular mechanism in it, which is about renewal through recombination of things that already exist. Like I was telling you, Aditi, the deity of this nakshatra, is related to the 4 elements. We only have 4 elements. But all the different combinations, subsets that you can get out of this 4 can create the diversity that we have in existence. So this is the function of Punarvasu. And that means that Punarvasu doesn't create something new. Instead, it takes what already exists and reorganizes it, recombines it in a different way. It's like the process of recycling. And we can see this principle in nature everywhere. For instance, in an ecosystem, when something dies, it doesn't just discard it. The material gets reused. Let me use a very benign example. Leaves die, leaves fall on the forest ground. They decompose, and then they become nutrients for new growth. So it's the same elements recombining in different ways. And this is important because it's telling us that life grows through continuity, not replacement of things. And if you think about it, the same principle exists in our lives. Technically, we never start our life anew. We cannot undo what we know. We cannot undo what's already been configured in us. Those elements are now there. Those are the imprints and impressions that are made on us. And Punarvasu is saying, you know what? No matter how painful, no matter how bad, you don't have to destroy yourself. You don't have to destroy those impressions, those ingredients that are now in you. All you have to do is reorganize them. Like relationships that once upon a time created a lot of conflict are the things that eventually give us tremendous amount of emotional maturity in how to deal with ourselves and other people. It's the same experience, but we come to have a different interpretation. It becomes something very different. Like the experiences that we have, they constantly change based on how far we get, that space-time, that distance that we have from it. Day 1 is a very different experience than month 10, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Or think about those of us who come from, let's say, problematic families. Those things never change, but we can recombine the way that we interact by setting new boundaries. And then we have a different experience. So if you think about it, we didn't go back and change these experiences. We're not creating new experiences. It's the same emotional material, but we're rearranging it in a larger inner space. Now we have all of these different shelvings for these kinds of people, these kinds of experiences. This is how they come into relation with each other. So this is one of the deeper functions of Punarvasu. And when Jupiter comes here, this process gets intensified, because they're both representing something about expanding this inner space. This is why I was saying at the beginning, it felt like there was a regression. We're going back to our old memories, old emotional patterns. People that we thought we've put aside, somehow we're back in contact with them, or we're thinking about them. It's like everything old was resurfacing. So we're like, why am I back here? Am I not growing in my life? Isn't this Jupiter supposed to bring some sort of benefic result? Why am I falling behind? But this Jupiter, especially in its retrograde phase, in this nakshatra, was taking us back to places that are tight, where they have not gone through a growing process. This nakshatra and Jupiter were showing us that growth is not just this linear trajectory that you just get new step, new things, forward, forward, forward. Growth occurs within a set container. And growth moves in cycles. And Punarvasu, I was saying recycle, is talking about different cycles of things that are redoing themselves. Life and death is also a process of this cycle. So each cycle is going to bring us back to a familiar territory. But each time that we come back, the way that we've reviewed it, especially in this nakshatra and with Jupiter, there's a growth in our level of awareness. So it's not like you're moving in a circle, you're moving in a spiral. From where you are, it feels like you're moving in a circle. But if you were to zoom back and look, you're actually moving up in a spiral way, and the spiral is getting bigger. So you'll see that a conflict comes up, before it would induce anger in you instantly to keep it out there. Now you can actually sit and reflect, bring it into relation to your past learnings, things that have happened to you. Now you have the space to process. Like a wound that once upon a time used to create avoidance in you. Now it's creating curiosity. Like, why is this person doing this? And why do I feel that I need to actually pull myself away from it? All I'm saying is that if you sit and reflect, the inner space has a lot more room to process. There's a sense of wisdom now. So this transit has been about expanding our own inner sky, the inner space. And this is so important because if you think about it, I mean, we like to think about life, things objectively happening out there, we're the doer or it's happening to us. But when you think about everything that you are, it's a story. It's a narrative that's being held within, and we act from that premise, we feel from that premise, and this story needs space to breathe sometimes. If we give things a little bit of space in this story, we can act in a different way. And that changes the story of our life. That changes the quality of our life. It's giving us the capacity to hold the complexity of life, which includes all the negative emotions, positive emotion, negative experiences, and positive experiences, because that's the nature of life and what it means to be alive. We have to be able to digest it. We have to be able to hold it. And when we do have a bigger space, we're also able to understand other people, to integrate their perspective. A lot of times we become defensive because we don't have that sense. It's also about integrating the past into the present. A lot of people have a lot of problem with this. This is where a lot of their pain comes from. This is the knot inside of them tied so severely that we call that trauma. In the nakshatra of Punarvasu, we're getting a chance for renewal. And renewal doesn't mean you start a new life or things have to change completely. Renewal is coming from the expansion of the space, recombining things in a different way, which ultimately is about reorganizing life. Then we have a different experience of ourselves and our lives and of other people. And we have to just remember that we're going to be here for quite a while, because Jupiter is now stationing to go direct back through the entire degrees of this nakshatra till we get to 27 degrees and 27 minutes of Cancer. And that will take us into summer, into June, which is actually a blessing because now we have a few months of not just going backwards and revisiting things, old patterns, old ways of feeling, but to actually start that recombination process, that expansion process. Think of yourself as a carpenter who's going to be building a lot of shelves for a lot of experiences and reorganizing it. So we could look at Jupiter's journey through the sign of Cancer and through the nakshatra of Punarvasu about this profound phase of growth and development that we're going through. It's been about returning to familiar experiences and engaging with them with much greater awareness. This Jupiter is reminding us some of the most important transformations that we make in life are not the ones with these large declarations, gestures, a huge stroke of luck. No, some of our greatest transformative moments feel subtle and quiet. They are the meaningful kinds of transformations because your external world can change. But if your internal world is the same, you're going to revert back to exactly where you were. You see this with people who won lottery tickets. They have a poverty mindset, and it doesn't matter that they just won $250 million. In 10 years, they're declaring bankruptcy. And that's because the inner space is bankrupt. The inner space is small. In order to be able to incorporate that external experience into the interiority and allow the interiority to seamlessly speak to what's happening in the external, we have to grow the inner space first. That's a huge transformation. You can hold so much more of life experiences in a coherent way. And now we're coming to the end of this video. And before closing, I'd like to ask you to like, subscribe, share, and especially comment. I'd love to know how you're experiencing this inner growth. What was your expectation of Jupiter in the first place when Jupiter was going into Cancer? What did you think was going to happen? And how are you actually experiencing it? Where you stand today, how do you understand your inner needs, your interactions? What matters to you? And how you're planning to recombine different ingredients of your life to go through this expansion process. Do let me know. I'd love to know. And if you want a reading of this transit in your birth chart, other transits, or just to understand the blueprints that's been designated to you, you can go to my website for more information at parisayazdi.com. I have also linked my email in the description box below. And also, if you want to read articles that are more in depth and they always come with some self-inventory questions, you can also go to my website. And now to close. When we look back through the entire journey of Jupiter in the sign of Cancer up to this point, if we really pay attention, we can see how some of the most subconscious and deep patterns have come up to the surface or still coming up to the surface. They're becoming visible to us. Jupiter has brought us face to face to familiar pathways, old memories, old relationships, old questions about belonging, care, safety, security, family. And you know what? A lot of times they felt like regression. Like, why am I going to the past? Why am I reviewing things that I thought were behind me? Why the hell am I back in the same situation? And you know, Jupiter has 12-year cycles. Go back to 12 years ago. That's the last time when Jupiter was here. And you'll see there are some reemergent patterns. Go back to 24 years, reemergent patterns. But Jupiter is also a planet that's related to truth. So it's revealing a lot of the truth that are hidden within us. Truth that are actually no longer our truth, but we hold them as our truth. They have to come to the surface. We have to reevaluate them to understand how a different kind of perception and interpretation is needed. How our feelings towards certain things have to change now. So Jupiter has been expanding the inner space of the self. Jupiter wants more of life to unfold within us so that we can hold more life within us. After all, how are you going to do that Cancerian thing of care if you feel you're fed up, you just can't hold more, you can't give more? If your cup is empty, Jupiter is allowing us to see all of these things, and not just to see it. In the nakshatra of Punarvasu, to have the tools to be able to change it. In this nakshatra, we're learning how to renew life, not by striving to get the impossible, which is a new life, but how do we value the ingredients that are already there? How do we reorganize what already exists? So both Jupiter and Punarvasu are helping us in this meaning-making process. And the minute in life that you feel that you have the power to change the meaning of something, you are one of the most powerful human beings on this earth. Because you just transmuted, transformed a solid experience into another experience. This is the alchemy of our internal worlds, which is so powerful. This Jupiter in Cancer and the nakshatra are expanding our realm of interiority from within. Imagine that you can now hold every experience that used to overwhelm you. You can just hold it and it does not touch you in terms of having the ability to harm you because it feels too big, too heavy. Imagine integrating these emotions that once felt impossible to even face them. So just keep tucking it away behind some other thing. This is how we get shadows. This is how we get inner demons. But imagine there's so much inner space that you can bring it up and you can maintain the right amount of distance from it and have a dialogue with it. And then you have the power of meaning making. You command it to take its rightful place in your internal landscape. We do have this power, but it has to be cultivated. And you might look around you right now and you're like, in my external world, nothing has changed since Jupiter has come around into Cancer. But the inner sky of your life and your inner self has become a lot larger. And in reality, nothing meaningful can change externally, as I said, if your internal self is still dealing with paradigms of scarcity, poverty, fear, resentment, revenge. These things have to change in order for us to make meaningful external changes. That means if we want meaningful external results, we have to change the architecture of our inner landscape. So this retrograde might have felt like one of the most stagnant phases of life, but we were reconfiguring our inner foundation. There was a reason why you were going back to those nitty-gritty memories and feelings. And now that Jupiter is starting its forward motion, we should start to see the correspondence between the inner and the outer world. It's like that saying, as above, so below. But with this transit, it's almost like the reverse applies. So with Jupiter moving forward, this period of reflection, of really going inwardly, is coming to its conclusion. Now it's going to move forward. Now we're in the recombination process of Aditi, Punarvasu Nakshatra. And this is going to be ongoing again till 27 degrees of Cancer, till we get to one of the most blessed nakshatras after Punarvasu, which is the nakshatra of Pushya. I will come back to talk about that. Jupiter will still be in Cancer and will be making its transition into the sign of Leo in that nakshatra. That's where we actually get proper nourishment for our growth to take forward movement. And if you think about it, we like Jupiter to just give us luck, just give us the good things, expand the things that we want in life. But that's not what Jupiter is about. The essence of Jupiter, the real work of Jupiter, is about creating coherence, meaning, and a greater sense of wholeness. Jupiter is not about adding to the quantity of our lives, it's about adding quality of life. And that requires wisdom and mastery, and one of the hardest things to do in this life. Not just to know things, but to let that knowing become the embodiment of you, so that it is you. This is Jupiter's true job. And that kind of growth is always quiet, is always private, the way the sign of Cancer is. And it happens in the internal spaces of the self. And now I'd like to leave us with a wish for this Jupiter and the remainder of its journey in the sign of Cancer. And I say, may this inner space that has opened continue to grow and strengthen. And may the lessons of renewal become the nourishment we need for our lives and ourselves to evolve. And may the wisdom that has quietly rooted within us guide the next chapter of our lives towards greater coherence, meaning, and wholeness. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.